Hi everybody, I'm Swathi Namburi. I work at Swedish Cancer Institute, also in Seattle. And I'll be talking about how we started a CAR T program at our center and how we've addressed various challenges through our journey and how we interact with our community sites and other locations to try to expand access. We're kind of a hybrid tertiary care hematology practice. We're not a large academic center in the traditional sense because we don't have a medical school, fellows, et cetera. But we do provide tertiary care type service. We have a lot of amazing clinical trials, half of which are phase 1. We do autologous transplant, CAR T, cell therapy, administer bispecifics, treat acute leukemias, et cetera, and we have an infusion center that is open 7 days a week. And then we're connected to the larger Providence Clinical Network, so we're sort of the hub of hematology, I would say, and then we're sort of now peripherally connected to sites in Alaska, Oregon, California, and Texas. More immediately in the Seattle region, our immediate network sites are in Ballard, Issaquah, and Edmonds, which are various, Ballard is in Seattle, Issaquah and Edmonds are towns about 15 miles away from Seattle. And then we've recently expanded into Everett, which is about 20 miles north of Seattle. And all of our colleagues there are always interested in trying to provide treatment to their patients and trying to make that treatment as accessible as possible. And we've had sites within the greater Providence network reach out to us because they're interested in using bispecifics at their site, and we provide mentorship and education, and our nurses share a lot of our resources that we use internally as they start to expand their use of immunotherapy. And things have changed over the years to make CAR T and bispecifics more accessible. Originally, back in 2019, there was a rule that you had to have 4 doses of tocilizumab ready at your site. Otherwise, it was not considered a safe site for CAR T cell therapy. They reduced that to 2 doses in 2021 because of the high use of tocilizumab because of the pandemic. And that people were running low and may not necessarily have that available at all times. And that was sort of like a mini baby step. What really changed is that last year in June, a lot of rules actually changed, but practice actually hasn't changed that much at the vast majority of centers, I would say, in the United States. For example, patients only needed to stay 2 weeks close to their treatment center compared to 4 weeks. Driving restrictions got a lot easier, and the amount of daily monitoring needed also reduced. This, in theory, was done so that in particular cases where patients may be eligible for less stringent monitoring or early discharge, that option could be available for them. And is something that is at our forefront of our mind for kind of thinking about how do we expand access? Are there people that are not coming for care only because of some of these particular restrictions? And how can the variety of CAR T products that are now available and how can the additional information that we know about CAR T help us safely deliver this care to these patients? So just going through kind of our history and what we've learned along the way, back in the olden times, 1975 to 1998, Fred Hutch Research Center was located at First Hill at our hospital. And so we had some nurses that have been around through that whole journey and still there at Swedish, who were enthusiastic in supporting the launch of our autologous stem cell program in 2014 and 2015. Our first CAR T product that we gave was an investigational cell therapy product. This is how a lot of centers start their CAR T journey that don't have experience doing a lot of transplants or have never given CAR T before. Starting CAR T at your center is a big investment for yourself, your hospital system, And these are very expensive treatments with very expensive rescue medications that are sometimes needed. Not everybody is on board. Through a clinical trial, especially with the newer CAR T products that are coming out now in clinical trials in 2026 and 2027, they tend to be safer, easier to use with lower risk. So as far as the physician-patient interaction and how sick the patient may get, may be a lot better than the older CAR T products that are FDA approved, and therefore easier to onboard and get experience with. The financial blowback is also easier, plus you have a robust research team to sort of help you support through it. If questions arise or side effects arise that you're unfamiliar with, there's a larger network there to support you. And then, very recently, I think in December, we infused our 100th cell therapy patient through a research clinical trial. So it has always been from the beginning and continues to be a big part of who receives CAR T. It's often through a research program. Then we expanded to be able to give commercial CAR T, and then through clinical trials, we gave our first allo CAR Ts in 2020 and onwards. So we offer most of the commercial CAR Ts now. What we also have is sort of a more focused, I guess, care paradigm. Because we are a smaller center, the patient has a smaller group of people that they interact with throughout their whole journey. We know our patients fairly well. They get to know our team fairly well. They feel comfortable reaching out when issues come up. They're never sort of lost in the system. And when a patient comes and they're interested in CAR T, there may be other options that are good for them as well. So having one physician that's comfortable providing all of the options available to them is also helpful, because it helps the patient really make the best decision that's well suited for them. So I think in a lot of ways, a smaller center can be very successful in giving both CAR T cell therapy, but also reviewing other options that might be good for that patient, just as a specialist in that disease and not necessarily only a specialist in that modality of treatment. We try very hard to minimize our ask of the patient. So a lot of the staging evaluations, a lot of the pre-leukapheresis evaluations that they need to have, we let them get closer to home. Obviously, that's a lot easier when they're an in-network site, if it's another Providence site or Swedish site, but we don't make that a necessity either. No matter what cancer center they typically go to, we have them get their studies done there, as long as it is a fairly routine test, such as an echocardiogram and such forth. If there are issues that arise and we need to have multiple things done, we do try to arrange them in sequence so that their initial trip can still be completed in a 24 to 36-hour time frame, and they can meet with cardio-oncology or have whatever else done, a new biopsy done, and things like that. We're talking about people that may be coming from hundreds of miles away, and gas prices alone can be a barrier that they can't even maybe comfortably make the initial trip. We offer virtual stem cell CAR T classes. This allows other caregivers that are interested in supporting the patient to learn about CAR T without necessarily also making that initial trip with them. And patients often have rotating caregivers where there's one person for the first 2 weeks and a different person for the last 2 weeks. And this also allows people from out of state, out of country to support the person. And I think all CAR T centers essentially provide some sort of form of lodging assistance, social work evaluations, and things like that to make sure that people are able to be off of work and come for their care. But I think in general, we really do emphasize, when you are here in Seattle for your treatment, it really has to be something you cannot do anywhere else. And we try to let them do everything else close to home. And then over time, as we have many years of experience behind us using bispecific antibodies, for example, we started expanding use of bispecifics at our network sites. Initially, we would initiate all of the bispecifics, and after the first month, patients would receive the remainder of their treatment at the network site. We've broadened that to being able to initiate and continue treatment at our network sites with some collaboration with the physician and a nurse coordinator that sort of makes sure that all the steps are followed through, including the monitoring, and that the physicians there have a person to call if something goes wrong or if the person is sicker than they expect. So we do support our network sites being able to both start and continue bispecific therapy long-term. For CAR-T, they still come to our center at First Hill. Currently in the Providence system, Seattle and Portland used to be the only sites for CAR-T. Pretty recently, in the summer of 2025, we supported a center in Texas being able to start doing CAR-T cell therapies. They had a low-volume autologous transplant program for many years, and so far they've given 6 CAR-T infusions successfully. And again, we sort of are there on backup pharmacy and physician backup in case questions arise or issues arise with the patient to support them. And we provide guidance. You know, it's important to make sure you have a good prior authorization specialist pretty much dedicated to CAR-T. If you're a smaller center and you're not going to be giving a lot of CAR-T or bispecifics, you need to make sure that whatever you are giving is going to be reimbursable to you. You know, we kind of help them model meetings to review how did the prior patients do? Did we get reimbursed for certain things we had to use during their treatment and things like that? A lot of smaller hospitals are living in an environment where financial success in general is unreachable and are kind of struggling to stay afloat. And so taking on a new endeavor, especially very expensive endeavors like bispecifics and CAR-T, can really come at a big challenge if you don't have somebody kind of keeping an eye on it and you don't have somebody to ask if certain issues come up during this process. And that includes unexpected costs. Medications like dexamethasone, methylprednisolone are cheap, but tocilizumab, anakinra, siltuximab are not cheap. And so making sure that you know what your plan B is and that it is both accessible and affordable by your hospital system is also important. It's not often that we have to jump to the more expensive medications. Emapalumab, for example, is not accessible or affordable at our institution, but it is at certain large centers. I know they've given it at Moffitt and other places. But so not all of these medications that other sites may be able to use are going to be accessible or affordable at your site. So it's really important to think, okay, if things go wrong, this is my plan B and this is my plan C, because things go wrong pretty fast sometimes and you don't really have a chance to then figure out what you're going to be able to use. And you know, for new centers that are starting up, not all CAR-T or bispecifics are the same, and now there are a lot on the market, and it can get kind of confusing about, okay, what is our priority and what do we want to get? And this may be common knowledge, but in general, you know, lymphoma is easier and friendlier, and especially mosunetuzumab is a great bispecific to start with. So starting with lymphoma and expanding to myeloma and ALL is sort of a natural transition where you can gain both experience and institutional experience and prior authorization experience, the whole deal, and feel comfortable using those particular products, and then moving on to myeloma, which unfortunately, for whatever reason, is always a little bit more worrisome in different ways. There are no REMS requirements for bispecifics or CAR-T in lymphoma, whereas the myeloma bispecifics still require REMS. And the lymphoma patients typically do tend to have slightly less issues with long-term cytopenias and things like that, and some recover quickly when they respond to treatment. Myeloma CAR-Ts can have all kinds of exciting new side effects, such as delayed neurotoxicity and inflammatory enterocolitis. And so that might not want to be your first go-to to first crack at a CAR-T is not the best idea. And then find your helpers early and keep them engaged. You know, be friends with your ID doctors and pulm doctors and ICU doctors and neurologists and rheumatologists and your nearby allotransplanters, because at some day you will need all of them, and you will run into issues you've never had to see before clinically, and it's important to build and establish those relationships. I think moving forward, you know, 2026 and into 2027, What I would love for us to have, as far as policy changes, is better remove state barriers to access tertiary care through virtual health. There's really no reason for that. There's an artificial reason for that. I mean, it's a made-up rule that we created, and not we, but in general, our government, I guess. But other fields have broken that barrier. Psychologists are able to provide care across state lines. We in Washington can provide care to patients from Alaska that come to us for care for continuity purposes, but that's kind of a limited role. As we move to treating rare diseases or challenging clinical conditions, I think it's important for people to be able to see specialists in other states virtually because they're not going to be able to travel there all the time. And then internally, really looking closer at earlier discharges, expanding, the distance rules after the 2-week mark. These are things we're actively looking into to try to provide safe care. Some CAR-Ts will be a lot more amenable to this than others. And so looking closely at which ones those are and trialing that is important. I think liso-cel, for example, for somebody going in, lymphoma patient with low tumor burden, be treating with liso-cel, I think it's reasonable if they happen to be 2 hours away to let them maybe go home after day 14. So we will try and see what happens, but I think it's worth trying because if that's the only reason they can't get the treatment they need, then we have to at least give it a try if the patient is a willing participant and their local doctor is a willing supporter. And science will come through. I think there'll be more real-world studies to help us safely give CAR-Ts so that we can control their expansion and their toxicity profiles better. And so people have less late side effects and people have less recovery issues, and we don't have to worry about them as much once they leave. In vivo and allogeneic CAR-Ts will also allow other centers to administer these products on their own. There'll be better home monitoring tools and prediction tools to help us with early discharges, and cheaper ways, hopefully, to deal with CRS and ICANS. And the best key is always prevention, so using steroids and other modalities early to prevent more aggressive inflammatory episodes, I think is also the wave of the future. So I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.